You ever notice how before something big happens in your life, before a breakthrough, before a miracle, there's always a strange silence, that quiet moment when nothing seems to move, when the prayers you've been sending out feel like they've disappeared into empty air? You start questioning everything. You look at your life and wonder, did God forget about me? That silence can feel cruel. It can make you doubt, make you lose focus, make you think maybe your effort didn't matter. But what if that silence isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the quiet you're in right now is not the absence of God, but the setup for His arrival? See, we live in a world that's obsessed with noise, constant talking, constant proving, constant posting, constant chasing. But when heaven is about to move, everything gets still. That silence is not a void. It's a pause before purpose unfolds. When God is about to do something major in your life, He'll often quiet everything around you so that you can finally hear what's happening asterisk within asterisk you. The storm outside doesn't have to be loud for the transformation to begin. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought in whispers, not war cries. Think about a seed buried in the ground. It doesn't make noise. Nobody sees it. It's hidden, surrounded by darkness, pressed under pressure. But something is happening down, their roots are breaking out, life is forming, and strength is building. You don't dig it up every few days to check if it's growing. You wait because you trust the process. In the same way, when your life feels buried, when you feel covered by silence, that's not the end, that's your growing season. That's where faith learns to breathe without proof. Sometimes God hides you to heal you. He removes certain people, closes certain doors, quiets certain opportunities, not because He's taking from you, but because He's positioning you. The silence is His workshop. You might not hear hammering or chiseling, but He's crafting something behind the scenes. You keep asking for the noise of progress, but God gives you the calm of preparation. Because if He showed you everything too soon, you'd run before you were ready. You'd step into the blessing before your character could handle it. So He slows things down. He lets you sit in the silence so that when the breakthrough comes, you'll have the strength and wisdom to sustain it. Now, the hardest part of this journey is not the waiting, it's the wondering. It's that voice inside that says, if you really cared, wouldn't something be happening by now? But you need to understand something. Silence doesn't mean inactivity. Just because you can't hear Him doesn't mean He's not working. When you call out to Him and there's no immediate response, don't assume He's ignoring you. He's listening, He's planning, He's aligning pieces of your life you can't even see. When heaven is quiet, it's because the orchestration of your next move is too complex for your understanding. You've got to learn to trust what's happening beneath the surface. That stillness, that pause, that empty space, it's sacred. It's where your patience is tested and your faith is stretched. It's the cocoon that transforms you from who you were into who you're meant to become. And if you rush that process, if you try to fill the silence with noise, you'll miss the whisper that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Sometimes we ask for clarity, but what we need is quiet, because clarity doesn't come from chaos. It comes when you learn to sit in the silence without demanding an explanation. It's in those moments of stillness that your strength builds silently, your purpose becomes clearer, and your heart starts to align with something greater than your plan. You can't hear divine instruction when you're surrounded by distraction. You can't see divine direction when you're constantly trying to make noise to fill the gaps of your faith. You might be in that place right now, a place where doors have closed, friends have disappeared, the phone doesn't ring, and you feel forgotten. But I want you to know this. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. The silence is not a punishment, it's a promotion in disguise. God is quiet because He's working on something that requires your stillness. When the silence breaks, it won't be a whisper, it'll be a roar of victory that was born in your patience. So instead of fearing the silence, start listening to it. There's power in that pause. There's purpose in that peace. Every warrior knows that before a great battle, there's a stillness, the kind that makes you gather your breath, focus your mind, and steady your heart. That's what this is. You're standing in divine stillness before divine movement. And when that moment comes, when God steps in, everything that's been quiet will make sense. The silence will become your testimony. So hold on. Don't lose heart in the quiet places. Don't mistake divine silence for divine absence. Because right now, while you wait, while you wonder, while you question, heaven is aligning everything for your favor. The silence before the storm is the moment that defines every victory that's about to unfold. And I'll tell you this, your breakthrough won't come with a warning. It'll come suddenly, right after the silence. Stay ready, stay faithful, stay watchful, because when that silence breaks, it won't just be the sound of victory, it'll be the sound of God stepping into your battle. You know, the real battle isn't always what's happening around you. It's what's happening inside you. We look at life and think the enemy is out there, the people who hurt us, the circumstances that failed us, the dreams that slipped through our hands. But the truth is, the hardest war you'll ever fight is the one within your own mind. That's where faith and fear collide. That's where doubt whispers louder than truth. And that's where the Lord begins His real work. See, when you wake up every morning and face that voice that says you're not enough, you've made too many mistakes, you don't have what it takes, that's the battlefield. And if you don't learn to win there, it doesn't matter how strong you look on the outside, because the real fight is spiritual, it's emotional, it's internal. The moment you start winning inside, everything outside begins to fall in line. You can't conquer what's outside of you if you're defeated within. You can't stand up to the storms of life when your heart is drowning in fear, and yet this is where God meets you, not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet of your thoughts. That's why He doesn't always remove your struggles. Instead, He strengthens your spirit to handle them. He shifts your focus from why me to what in me needs to change so I can rise above this. Every challenge you face is a mirror, showing you not what you lack, but what you need to discover. The anger, the insecurity, the fear, they aren't enemies to hate. They're signals pointing you to areas that need healing. You see, the Lord doesn't just fight your battles for you. He fights them asterisk through asterisk you. And that means He starts with your heart. He starts by reshaping your thoughts, your mindset, your inner world, because you can't live a victorious life with a defeated mind. Sometimes you think the enemy is the problem, the rejection, the betrayal, the failure. But those things only have power when they control your perception. The real enemy is the thought that tells you you'll never rise again. The real enemy is that fear that keeps you from trying, that doubt that keeps you from believing, that guilt that keeps you from forgiving yourself. When you learn to silence those voices and replace them with truth, you'll realize the battle was never between you and the world, it was between you and your own reflection. You have to decide which voice you're going to believe, the one that limits you or the one that liberates you. Because whichever one you feed will lead your life. Every thought you allow takes root. Every emotion you nurture shapes your decisions. You can't pray for victory and think defeat. You can't ask for peace and feed on worry. The Lord can't pour new strength into a mind filled with old fear. That's why the battle starts in your thoughts. That's the territory the enemy wants most. Because if he can win there, he doesn't have to fight anywhere else. There comes a time when you have to stop blaming circumstances and start confronting your own patterns. The anger you carry, the doubt you entertain, the fear you rehearse, they become walls that block what God is trying to do through you. You've got to let those walls fall. You've got to look at the fear and say, you don't control me anymore. You've got to face the doubt and say, you don't define me anymore. You've got to look at your reflection and say, I may have fallen, but I'm not finished. Because that's when heaven begins to move. That's when the Lord steps in, not when you've won, but when you've surrendered the inner chaos and allowed his peace to take over. There's power in shifting your focus. When your mind starts believing that the battle is already won, your spirit begins to align with victory. You stop reacting to life and start responding with wisdom. You stop panicking when things fall apart and start trusting that even in the breaking, something divine is being built. Because once your inner world is stable, no storm on the outside can shake you. The Lord's greatest victories are not when he changes your situation, it's when he changes you. When you walk through the same valley that used to scare you, but this time your heart is calm. When the same people who tried to break you see that you're still standing, still shining, still moving forward, that's victory. You didn't just survive the battle, you conquered the battlefield within. So don't underestimate what's happening inside you right now. Every doubt you fight, every tear you shed, every moment you choose to trust even when it hurts, that's the battle being won. That's the transformation happening beneath the surface. You may not see the progress yet, but you're being rebuilt from the inside out. The mind that once trembled in fear is learning faith. The heart that once carried pain is learning peace. And the soul that once felt lost is learning to stand tall in divine strength. Remember, the greatest warriors don't always carry swords, they carry faith. They may look calm on the outside, but inside they've fought every voice that said give up, and answered it with not today. That's what it means to fight the battle within. That's how you rise, not by resisting every storm, but by mastering your inner peace in the middle of it. So right now, whatever's warring inside you, your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, don't run from them. Face them, speak truth to them. Because when the Lord steps into that inner battle, the noise of fear becomes the music of faith, and the war within turns into a victory that nothing outside can take away. There comes a moment in life when you hit that wall, when your strength runs out, your plans fall apart, and nothing seems to make sense anymore. You've done everything you can, you've prayed, you've fought, you've tried to stay strong, but you reach that breaking point where your heart whispers, I can't do this anymore. You look around and see no way out, no light ahead, no hope left. That moment feels like failure, but it's not. It's transformation in disguise, because that's the very place where God steps in. That's the turning point, the place where your human strength ends and divine strength begins. You see, we live in a world that glorifies control. We're told to hustle harder, push further, never quit. But there comes a time when you can't push anymore. You've reached your limit, and it's in that very limit that heaven finds an opening. You see, as long as you think you've got it all under control, you'll keep fighting in your own power. But when you finally hit the point where your hands fall open, that's when grace walks in. That's when the impossible starts to move. Breaking points are not the end, they are the thresholds to break through. You don't know what's inside you until everything around you starts to fall apart. You don't discover real faith when life is easy. You find it when your world is shaking and you still choose to believe. It's easy to trust when everything makes sense, But when life blindsides you, when the people you counted on walk away, when the doors you prayed for close in your face, when the future you planned disappears overnight, that's where faith is born. That's where you meet the power that's greater than your own will. Sometimes God lets you reach your breaking point because He knows that's the only way to break what's been holding you back. You might be praying for relief, but God is preparing release. He's not trying to destroy you. He's trying to rebuild you, and rebuilding always begins with breaking. Just like a seed has to break before it can grow, your life has to crack open before new life can come out of it. You can't skip that process. The pain you're in isn't proof that God has left you, it's proof that He's working. You ever notice how the most beautiful stories are born from struggle, how diamonds are made under pressure, how gold is purified through fire? It's the same with you. The pressure you're feeling isn't there to crush you, it's there to carve you into who you were created to be. The breaking point is not your downfall, it's your making. Because when you lose everything you thought you needed, you finally discover what truly sustains you. When all the noise is stripped away, you find that still small voice saying, "I'm still here." You may think the end of your strength means defeat, but in reality, it's divine timing. When you've done all you can and you've got nothing left to give, that's when God shows you that the outcome was never dependent on your ability. It was always dependent on His. Sometimes He waits until you're out of options just to show you that His resources are unlimited. You're not meant to carry the whole battle alone. You're meant to fight until you can't, and then stand still and let the Lord take over. That's the beauty of surrender. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's realizing that your fight doesn't have to come from fear anymore. It can come from faith. It's standing in the middle of chaos and saying, "I may not know what's next, but I know who holds me." That shift changes everything, because the moment you let go, the battle begins to turn. The weight you've been carrying starts to lift. The pieces that didn't make sense start to fall into place. You begin to see that what looked like loss was actually positioning. What felt like delay was actually protection. Every great victory starts with a breaking point, because that's the only way you'll stop depending on your own strength and start leaning on God's power. The breaking point is where miracles are born, when you fall to your knees, when you run out of plans, when your tears become your only prayer. That's where heaven starts to move. God doesn't step in when you're strong. He steps in when you're sincere. When you say, "I can't do this alone," that's when He says, "Good, now let me." So don't be afraid of your breaking point. Don't curse it. Don't run from it, because the breaking point is the birthplace of your destiny. It's the place where your heart learns humility, your spirit learns strength, and your faith learns trust. It's the moment you stop trying to be your own savior and start realizing you already have one. And when you look back later, you'll realize that the thing that almost broke you became the thing that built you. You'll thank God not just for the victories, but for the breaking, because that's where you met Him in ways you never could have otherwise. That's where you learned that even when everything else falls apart, His presence never leaves. So if you're standing at your breaking point right now, tired, empty, out of answers, don't quit. You're not done. You're just being remade, because right when your strength ends, His begins, and that's when everything changes. Sometimes in life, you can't see what's really happening around you because the most powerful movements aren't visible to the human eye. You pray, you wait, you work, and it feels like nothing is changing. You think heaven has gone silent, but what if I told you that right now there are things shifting behind the scenes on your behalf? Forces aligning that you can't see, doors being prepared that haven't even been built yet. People being positioned who don't even know they're part of your story yet. The unseen doesn't mean the inactive. The quiet doesn't mean the absent. When the Lord steps into your battle, He doesn't always come with lightning or thunder. Sometimes he moves like a whisper that changes everything. The truth is, most of what God does for you, you'll never see while it's happening. Because if you saw it, you'd try to control it. If you understood it, you'd rush it. So he hides it not from you, but for you. He hides his work in the unseen so that you can learn to walk by faith, not by sight. Faith isn't believing when you can see the plan. Faith is trusting that their asterisk is asterisk a plan, even when you can't see a single step ahead. You've got to understand heaven has its own strategy. You may think you're losing, but God is just repositioning you. You may think the delay means denial, but he's actually defending you from something that wasn't meant for you. You may think the door that closed was a rejection, but it was really a redirection towards something greater. The unseen army of heaven is always working, arranging, protecting, guiding, but you won't always get the details. That's where faith has to step in and say, even when I don't see it, I know something is moving. Think about it. The air you breathe, you can't see it, but it keeps you alive. Gravity, you can't see it, but it holds you to the ground. The signal that connects your phone, you can't see that either, but it carries every message. So why do we demand to see God's hand before we trust his plan? Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not powerful. In fact, the invisible is often more powerful than the visible. That's how God works. Quietly, subtly, perfectly. Sometimes he blinds you to what's happening because if you saw it too early, it would overwhelm you. He hides his power in ordinary moments, a stranger's kindness, a delay that frustrates you but keeps you safe, a no that turns out to be the biggest blessing of your life. You call it coincidence, but heaven calls it coordination. You think it's just random, but there are no accidents in the divine. Everything is woven together in a way you may not understand now, but one day, when you look back, it'll all make sense. There are battles you didn't even know you were fighting, dangers you never saw, storms that never reached you because the unseen army was standing guard. That's the power of grace. You're covered in ways you can't measure. You're protected in places you never imagined. And sometimes the biggest miracles are the ones you never even knew you needed. But here's the thing, faith doesn't just wait for the unseen, it celebrates it. It says, I may not have the evidence, but I've got the expectation. It's the kind of faith that looks at an empty sky and still believes rain is coming. It's the kind of faith that walks toward a closed door, knowing it'll open at the right time. It's the kind of faith that doesn't need proof to praise. When you carry that kind of faith, the unseen starts to work in your favor, because faith attracts what fear repels. You might not realize it, but sometimes God's silence is his strategy. He's moving things into position. He's making sure everything aligns perfectly. That's why patience is power, because while you wait, heaven works. Every tear you've cried, every prayer you've whispered, they didn't disappear. They became part of the divine blueprint that's still being drawn. And when the timing is right, what's been hidden will be revealed. The blessing you thought was lost will find its way to you, not a moment too early or too late. That's why you can't give up when you can't see results. The absence of progress doesn't mean the absence of purpose. Sometimes God hides the progress because he's protecting the process. If you saw every detail, you might stop praying. You might stop depending on him. So he keeps the curtain closed while he sets the stage for your breakthrough. And when the time is right, when your faith is ready, when your heart can handle it, he pulls that curtain back, and you'll realize he's been there all along. So stop measuring God's presence by what's visible. Start trusting the invisible, because the greatest battles are not fought in the open. They're won in the unseen. Every moment you choose to believe when there's no sign, every time you speak hope into silence, every time you say, I still trust you, even when you don't feel it, that's when heaven moves. You don't have to see the army to know you're protected. You don't have to see the way to know you're being led. Just because you don't understand what's happening doesn't mean it's not working. The unseen is not your enemy, it's your advantage. It's the evidence of a God who doesn't need to be seen to be real. And when he finally reveals what he's been preparing, you'll realize that what you thought was silence was actually strategy, and the unseen was always working in your favor. When God steps into your situation, the whole power dynamic changes. Everything that used to have authority over you begins to lose its grip. Fear starts to fade, doubt begins to tremble, and what once looked impossible starts to shift. You see, when the divine enters your battle, he doesn't always remove the enemies around you sometimes. He removes the influence they have over you. He doesn't always change what you see. He changes what you believe. And that change on the inside, that's where the real victory begins. Life has a way of making us forget who's really in charge. When we face loss, rejection, or pain, it's easy to think that everything is against us. You start to feel powerless. You start to think that your circumstances define you. But when the Lord steps in, you realize something profound. You were never fighting for victory. You were fighting from it. Because his presence doesn't just even the playing field, it tilts it in your favor. There's a moment in every battle when you have to stop focusing on the size of your problem and start focusing on the size of your God. Fear will always try to convince you that you're outnumbered, that you don't have enough, that you can't make it. But when faith enters the room, it whispers, you've already won. Because faith doesn't see obstacles. It sees opportunities for God to show his power. And when you start walking in that awareness, your posture changes. You stop trembling, and you start trusting. You stop reacting to what's against you, and you start responding with what's within you. The shift of power doesn't happen when everything outside you changes. It happens the moment you realize who's walking with you. It happens when you stop begging for God to show up and start believing he already has. That's the transformation not from weakness to strength, but from uncertainty to assurance. Because once you understand that divine authority lives in you, fear has no place to live around you. There was a time when every small setback used to break you. Every closed door used to shake your confidence. But now, when you walk with divine awareness, you understand that closed doors don't mean you've been rejected, they mean you're being redirected. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start declaring, something greater must be coming for me. That's the difference when the Lord steps in. The battle may look the same, but you don't fight the same. You don't panic because you know you're protected. You don't complain because you know you're being prepared. You don't quit because you know you're being qualified. When power shifts, peace takes over. Suddenly, the things that used to make you anxious lose their power. The opinions of others stop controlling your emotions. The fear of failure stops paralyzing your purpose. Because you realize that no person, no circumstance, no enemy has the final say, only God does. And when he steps into your story, he doesn't need permission to change it. He just does. Sometimes the power shift doesn't come in thunder or lightning. It comes quietly in the moment you decide to forgive instead of hate, to pray instead of panic, to stand still instead of run away. That's power, that's authority, that's heaven's strength operating through human surrender. You might not see the evidence right away, but every time you choose peace over panic, every time you choose faith over fear, you're declaring that the power has shifted. You see, fear feeds on your attention. The more you focus on the storm, the bigger it gets. But when you shift your focus to the one who calms the storm, everything changes. The waves might still be crashing, the wind might still be howling, but suddenly you're not afraid anymore. Because you've realized something the world doesn't understand. Peace isn't the absence of the storm. It's the presence of divine power in the middle of it. There's freedom in knowing that the enemy doesn't have the authority he once did. There's power in walking through fire and not smelling like smoke. There's victory in looking at what once broke you and realizing it doesn't move you anymore. That's when you know the Lord has stepped in, when the same situation that once crushed you now becomes your testimony. And you've got to remember this. When God shifts the power, he doesn't just change what's attacking you, he changes you. He strengthens your spirit. He gives you eyes to see differently, ears to hear differently, a heart to feel differently. Suddenly, what used to discourage you becomes your motivation. The mountain that used to intimidate you becomes the platform that elevates you. That's the power shift. It's not about everything becoming easy. It's about everything becoming possible. It's about realizing that the same force that parted seas, that silenced lions, that moved mountains, that same power now moves through you. So when you walk into your next battle, don't walk in fear. Walk in authority. Because when God steps in, you stop fighting for your life and start living from his power. And when you walk like that, calm, confident, certain people notice. They'll look at you and wonder how you're still standing after all you've been through. They won't understand that it's not strength they're seeing. It's surrender. It's divine power flowing through human faith. So don't let fear dictate your next move. Don't give your situation more power than it deserves. Because the power already shifted, the victory's already been written, and the one who stepped into your battle has already declared the outcome you win. There comes a time in your journey when the noise around you gets so loud, it almost drowns out the whisper within you, the opinions, the judgments, the doubts they surround you, and suddenly you start questioning yourself. You start asking, did I really hear from God? Am I really meant for this? That's when faith becomes less about what you see and more about what you decide to stand on. Because when the Lord steps into your battle, he doesn't just silence your enemies, he strengthens your conviction. He gives you the kind of peace that doesn't come from everything being perfect, but from knowing that no matter how dark it gets, he's still in control. Sometimes you've got to walk through seasons where it feels like God is silent just to realize he's actually strengthening your hearing. You may not feel his presence, but that doesn't mean he's absent. It means he's teaching you how to trust when you can't trace him. That's what spiritual maturity looks like, when your trust doesn't depend on how things look, but on what you know deep down in your spirit. Because faith isn't about comfort, it's about commitment. It's about saying, even if I can't see the way out, I still believe the way exists. And when you walk like that, when your spirit says yes, while your circumstances scream no, that's when heaven begins to move. That's when God begins to show you that his silence was never neglect, it was strategy. Sometimes he withholds the answer not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because if he gave you the blessing too early, your character wouldn't be ready to carry it. You think he's delaying your breakthrough, but he's actually developing your backbone. Every battle isn't meant to destroy you. Some battles are meant to reveal you. They strip away the noise, the masks, the distractions, until only faith remains. And that faith, that quiet assurance, becomes your weapon. You start walking differently, talking differently, responding differently, because now you don't need everything to make sense to know you're protected. You don't need to understand every turn to know you're being led. That's what happens when the Lord steps in. He doesn't just fight for you, He fights asterisk through asterisk you. You've got to understand that some of your greatest breakthroughs won't come from what you do, they'll come from what you asterisk endure. Asterisk, it's easy to praise when things are good. It's easy to trust when doors are opening. But what about when doors slam shut? What about when you're in the waiting room of life and nothing seems to be moving? That's when your faith gets tested. That's when your character gets refined. That's when you find out whether you were just following God for blessings or because you actually believe in who He is. And I'm telling you, there's power in endurance. There's strength in staying faithful when everything in you wants to quit. Because while you're waiting, God is working. While you're crying, He's constructing. While you're breaking, He's building. You don't always see it, but He's setting up something greater. And when it manifests, you'll realize why you had to go through it, not because you were forgotten, but because you were being fortified. When you understand that, you stop seeing battles as punishments and start seeing them as preparation. You start realizing that every storm, every heartbreak, every delay was shaping you into the person who could handle what's coming next. The same fire that tried to destroy you is the one that refined you. The same pain that almost broke you is the one that built your purpose. And the moment you stop running from the fire and start walking through it with faith, that's the moment you step into power. There's something about pain that has a way of revealing who you really are. You'll never know the depth of your strength until you've had to stand in the middle of a storm with nothing to hold on to but your faith. You'll never understand the power of God until you've had to depend on Him completely. And when you do, you'll look back at what once terrified you and realize that wasn't the end of you, that was the beginning of you. So don't rush the process. Don't fight the silence. Don't fear the waiting. Because the Lord hasn't abandoned you. He's aligning you. He's not punishing you. He's positioning you. And when the time comes, when He finally steps in and the breakthrough unfolds, it won't just make sense, it'll make you grateful. You'll thank Him for every delay, every detour, every disappointment, because you'll see how each one led you closer to destiny. Every battle you face is a setup for something divine. And when you come out of it not bitter, but better, not broken, but built, people will look at you and see strength they can't explain. That's because it's not your strength they're seeing. It's the power of God flowing through someone who refused to give up. Someone who kept walking even when it hurt. Someone who trusted the process even when it didn't make sense.